A lot of foods that are bad for us do have carbs in them, but carbs themselves are not the enemy. It's an excess of carbs that's the enemy. When you are in a calorie deficit, you're not necessarily burning body fat directly. You're burning excess energy, and that can be in the form of fat or carbohydrates or protein even. Every time you exercise, also every time you eat, it's an opportunity to do something good for yourself. And when you do that thing, you feel better. Welcome to Only the Greatest Podcast. If you're feeling stuck and unsure what to do next in your fitness journey, we might be what you're looking for. My name is Philip. I own and operate OTG Fitness, which is a private personal training gym on the south side of Houston in Webster. I do this podcast every week with my best friend, Daryl. We've been friends since third grade and working out together ever since. Also joining us today will be Sean. He's the one that makes this podcast not only sound great, but look good as well. Our goal here is to help Houston make its way up the ladder of health and fitness. So if you're in the Houston area and ready to become the greatest version of yourself, be sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Do you ever feel like the world of fitness is full of contradictions and confusing advice? You hear today, do this thing, and then tomorrow, don't do that thing, right? Like, which is it? At the end of the day, you just leave with mass confusion and zero decisions are actually made. And I can tell you that you're not alone with that. Many people feel that way. My name's Philip. I personally lost almost 100 pounds, and it really changed my life. Shortly after that, I created OTG Fitness. And the goal at OTG Fitness is to keep things not only simple, but fun and effective as well. So today we're going to ditch these outdated myths, get rid of the quick fixes, and let you know the truth. Like what's actually going to work, what's supported by evidence, what have I learned in my almost 9 years now of personal training, working with actual people just like you. The three myths that we're going to debunk today are number one, that carbs are the enemy, right? We hear that all the time. Carbs are so bad. Not true. Myth number two, no pain, no gain. We've all heard this one, right? You got to play through the pain, fight through it, push through. And I personally think that just actually pushes more people away because they think it has to be so hard and you have to be so tough to get results. Not true. The last one that we're going to talk about is spot reduction of fat. This is probably a marketing thing. The belly fat craze really came around in the late 90s and early 2000s also with spot reduction of belly fat. That doesn't exist, and we're going to talk about why when we get to that. So let's right back to the beginning. Myth number one, that carbs are the enemy. Where this came from, I'm not 100% sure, but I can give you my thoughts as to where. Number one, the fact of the matter is that a lot of foods that are quote unquote bad for you, I'm putting that in air quotes. If you're not watching this on YouTube, you should be. Carbs are bad because sugar is a carb, right? A carbohydrate is a unit of energy. It's a food that has calories in it. Calories are the units of energy, and carbs happen to have those. And because sugar is a carbohydrate, it's a form of carbohydrate. I think that's a big part of where it came from. A lot of foods that are bad for us do have carbs in them, right? But carbs themselves are not the enemy. It's an excess of carbs that's the enemy. And oftentimes, if we're pointing out foods that are quote unquote bad for us, they have carbs with a certain combination of fats in them as well. And fats really have a lot of calories, right? Those little units of energy that we were talking about. Carbs happen to have about 4 calories for every gram. Fats, though, have 9 calories for every gram. And it is that perfect combination and unison of carbohydrates and fats put together that create not only the mouth feel, but the texture and the taste, the hyper palatable foods. It is that combination of things that you just can't only have one bite and you overconsume. The calorie density when you combine carbohydrates and fat together in the perfect ratios when that ratio is created so perfectly, the hyperpalatability comes into play and the caloric density is so high that you overconsume. If you keep your consumption under control, carbs are not bad by any means. Carbohydrates are the fuel for our body. They are number one preferred energy source that our body uses to perform. If we want to get to the gym and exercise and feel good, even think good, carbs work better, right? They work well. A lot of foods that you like have some carbs in them. So any diet that tells you to eliminate carbs altogether, we probably shouldn't do that. It's not a long-term sustainable answer to the problem. Some carbs that are good for us, all fruits are carbs. You may or may not realize this, but all fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. So that tells us right there that carbs aren't bad. Everybody knows vegetables good, right? Pizza bad, veggies good. Veggies equal carbohydrates. But guess what most vegetables don't have and fruits don't have is fats combined with them. Single ingredient food items like fruits, vegetables, meats are separate. We're not talking about that right now. We're talking about carbs. But those food items, we know that they are good for us, right? So carbs by themselves are not bad. So beyond sugar, we have various types of carbohydrates, but we're going to put them into two very easy categories for today. Simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. A combination of both are going to be great in our diet. And the easiest way for me at least, the easiest way to categorize these complex carbohydrates have fiber, right? So if you remember that complex carbohydrates have fiber in them, and just know that most of your carbohydrate consumption should come from that category. That's going to be your fruits and vegetables for the most part. Your simple carbohydrates, which are going to be more sugar-based, you can have those also, but in much lower amounts, right? Because those simple carbohydrates, the sugars of the world, are often going to be combined with fats. Those are your things like potato chips, or potato chips, brownies, cookies is the word that I was looking for. Cakes, all your desserts. Those are your simple carbohydrates combined with oil, butter, other ingredients that when you mix them together, make them taste so good that it's hard to keep our intake under control. You look at French fries, for example. French fries are nothing more than potatoes that are fried, right? Deep fried in oil, and then they throw salt on top. So potatoes by themselves, which is the base of a French fry, good. But when you dump them in the fryer and pour salt all over them, which salt's not terrible either, right? Another myth, right? There are some people that shouldn't have salt, right? So make sure you consult with your doctor and all that good stuff. But carbs by themselves, so potatoes, not bad. But dip them in the fryer, now we have this new enemy that that people call carbs, but it's actually carbs and fat because of the oil from the deep frying process combined together makes it hyper palatable, makes it the mouth feel, the way it chews in your mouth is even different, right? I've read some stuff about that. So you want to make sure that the carbohydrates that you're intaking, for the most part, are fiber based, and they are going to help you get towards your goals, not help you stay away from them, right? So eat carbs in moderation and the good kind. Next up, we're going to talk about no pain, no gain. This, I'm not sure at all actually where this one stems from. I think this is something that we convince ourselves of, and people say it to sound big and bad. Whenever they do get really good results, they want you to think that they worked super hard for those results. They had to play through a ton of pain to get there. And for sure, there's probably a subset of people that do, especially like professional athletes, people at the top tier at the top level of their industry and their sport or whatever, sure, they do have to. But if you're just a regular person like me, and anyone listening to this probably falls into that category, it doesn't have to be painful. Uh, you can get to your goals and you'll actually feel better. Isn't that crazy? Instead of feeling worse and having all this pain, you can actually feel better while also getting towards your goals, right? Because if you're actually playing through a ton of pain, that's just a recipe for injuries. We don't want that, right? We want slow, sustainable progress over time. And I think a lot of this is going to wrap us back around to like why you initially started thinking about that and then putting a time frame on those goals. And that time frame is probably going to be longer than you think or what you want it to be. But that is the reality of the situation. If we want to actually get to our goals and then stay at that place for a long time and even get better, probably go beyond those initial goals because your goals change over time, right? But either way, if we have a realistic time frame attached to those, you're actually going to feel better throughout the process. It doesn't have to hurt. You don't have to play through days, weeks, months, years of pain. Now, you're going to be a little sore in the beginning, sure. But if you do it right, you're probably going to be glad you feel that way. You're going to feel accomplished. Because remember that every time you exercise, also every time you eat, it's an opportunity to do something good for yourself. And when you do that thing, you feel better. And when you feel better, you work out more. And when you work out more, you feel better. And when you feel better, you eat better. And when you eat better, you feel better. And so on, right? So I want you to get into that, ever expanding loop of progress, right? We want to get better over time. You do not have to play through days, months, years of pain to get there, right? Don't let anyone tell you that. If someone does tell you that, all they're trying to do is tell a story to make themselves look better. They want you to know how hard they had to work, how much pain they had to go through, the sacrifices they had to make. Guys, it doesn't have to be that way. You can get there slowly but surely over time. It can be fun on that process as well. So don't forget. The last thing we're going to cover, spot reduction of fat. Simply a marketing term, right? If I tell you that you do this certain exercise or you eat this certain food and all your belly fat, for example, is going to disappear, doesn't that sound intriguing? The fact of the matter, though, is it's not true. Your body gains and loses fat symmetrically, right? And a lot of that will be dependent on genetics, right? So something that's kind of unfortunate, but is the reality. And I think that a lot of people in the beginning, you should accept this for what it is. Let's say, for example, you look in the mirror and you have a certain body part that you don't love. Even if you lose 20, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, whatever your goals are, it's likely that you're going to feel the same way about that body part. And that is because the way that our bodies lose fat is symmetrically together. So you just become a bigger or smaller version of that thing. Now, you can gain muscle in other areas that will offset that a little bit. But the reality is that you're going to get bigger or smaller in proportion for the most part. There's definitely, like I said, some genetics going on there. And then with that, like feeling that a certain body part you don't love when you see it, a lot of that's psychology, right? So don't forget about the psychology that you're playing on yourself as well. Just remember, like we talked about in the last, in part 2, that, when you work out and when you eat well, it is an opportunity to do something good for yourself and feel better. So focus on that part, not on the fact that you don't love that when, the way that your arms look in a certain position or the way that your hips look when you wear certain things. A lot of that is psychology, right? And so don't let that get to you. And then another thing that I do want to discuss that's kind of, more factual on this point is that fat burning in itself is kind of a term that we shouldn't use because really all that's going on is energy burning or calorie burning. Remember earlier we talked about the relationship between carbohydrates and calories and how calories are just a unit of energy. Well, when you are in a calorie deficit, you're not necessarily burning body fat directly. You're burning excess energy, right? And that can be in the form of fat or carbohydrates or protein, even if you're in a calorie deficit, right? So you're going to burn body fat, right? Which is different than the fat that you intake from food. So if you eat excess fat, you're going to store excess fat. If you eat excess carbohydrates, you're going to store excess carbohydrates. So it's important to understand the difference between, doing lots of exercise to burn fat versus doing lots of exercise to burn carbohydrates. Both of them are going to happen depending on how you eat. So the term fat burning, especially when it comes to exercise, I just don't like the term at all. It really should be a calorie burning. It should be the term that we use. And if you're in a calorie deficit, you will burn body fat, but which is different than dietary fat. So you can't lose fat from a particular area of your body. You will lose fat proportionally. You will get bigger and smaller over time, right? But your shape will, for the most part, unless you add muscle also, will be the same. So guys, don't forget that a lot of these things that you hear online are just myths. People make them up to confuse you, right? I want you to avoid restrictive diets, listen to your body, focus on building sustainable habits, creating goals that you can realistically get to over time. Fitness should be fun. It should be enjoyable. Empowering, right, is another word. It should be tailored to you and what you want to get out of it. So if you're ready to make that happen, feel free to reach out to us. My name's Philip. OTGfitness.com is our website. We're currently located in Webster on the south side of Houston. We have a new location opening in Pearland very soon. So if you go to OTGfitness.com, you can select either of those locations, and we'd love to help you out, right? So make sure you share this episode with anyone you know needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stuff just like it. And together we can create a healthier and happier Houston.